Okay, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Happy Thursday afternoon. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is NTD 2020 Safety and Security, Non-Rail and Rail Mode Reporting Updates. We are pleased to have as our presenter today Anne Singleton, and we have silent partner James Overbeek, who will be monitoring the Q&A and the chat boxes. Anne Singleton is a senior safety and security analyst for the NTD program since 2009. Anne has been involved with several FTA initiatives, such as the State Safety Oversight Program, the Commuter Rail Safety Study, and the Transit Bus Safety and Security Program in a variety of roles. Prior to Anne's work with FTA, she was a software instructor and database developer. James Overbeek joined the NTD team in 2015. He is a graduate of Randolph-Macon College and currently works as a validation analyst for the Safety and Security module of the National Transit Database. Once the presentation starts, if you have a question, you can ask it at any time by typing it in the Q&A box. If you do not see the Q&A box, you can enable it by clicking on the Q&A box icon on the Zoom control bar, which might be at the bottom or the top of your screen. You can also type a question in the chat box, and we will try to get to that as well. I pasted the link to the handouts in the chat box, so if you don't see it, I can paste it again, but you might want to scroll up. And I think that covers everything. I am now going to turn the presentation over to Anne.
Thank you, Lori. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking part in this webinar today. Today we'll discuss clarifications and form changes that have been put into production since the last training session in April and new form changes for 2020. As we begin, I'm not advancing here. Let me try that again. Okay. Sorry, I don't know. There we go. All right. So as I was going to say, as we begin, please note that some of the clarifications and form changes are mode specific. As we go along, I will let you know what modes the topic pertains to if it's not evident within the presentation. We'll start with clarifications, including several that are in place for 2019, but we thought they were worth reviewing, or the clarification, as I mentioned a moment ago, came into production after our last training session. First, to recap that if there is no clear attempt at a suicide, yet a person was transported only for mental health evaluation, that this is reported on the non-major monthly summary SNS 50 report. For example, a patron comes into a station and tells an employee or an official or police person that they're thinking about harming themselves, and the official calls for transport. This would get reported on the SNS 50. Rail vehicle collisions. A collision between two rail vehicles has been automatically reportable since 2015. For a brief period of time, we collected maintenance vehicle collisions where a revenue vehicle was not involved as a non-transit collision. So this clarification is really about how we collect the data, not a threshold change. So before we actually talk about how to collect the data, let's review the guidance. A collision between a revenue train and another revenue train, a revenue train and a maintenance vehicle, or a collision between two maintenance vehicles are automatically reportable. It meets the rail-to-rail collision threshold. A collision between a revenue train or a non-revenue maintenance vehicle with anything else, such as a person or an object, is also reported as a rail collision, but a threshold must be met, such as property damage or an injury. The key word here is vehicle. A rail maintenance vehicle is one that is self-propelled. For example, a flat car is not self-propelled, so it would not be considered on its own a vehicle. But if that flat car is attached to a work train or an other maintenance vehicle, it becomes part of that consist and therefore constitutes a rail vehicle. So now, how to report. This table is designed to assist you in how to report the rail collision. Now, I do want to make one disclaimer here. This table that's shown here is slightly different than the one that was in the handout that was sent to you. I had accidentally included an extra row in there, and I've taken that out for this presentation. So on your handouts, if you have that printed out, you'd want to cross through row 5 there, and that'll take care of it. So I apologize for any confusion there. That's entirely my fault. Okay, so when you create a rail collision report, the collision event form requires you to enter how many transit trains are involved and how many other vehicles are involved. So you see that in a revenue train to revenue train collision, you would include 2 trains involved. For a revenue train to a high rail or other maintenance vehicle collision, you would include 1 train and 1 other vehicle. If the collision's between 2 maintenance vehicles, then you don't include any trains, but you include 2 other vehicle forms. All of these, again, still meet that rail-to-rail reporting threshold. Now, in the last row of the table, you'll see that when a work train or maintenance vehicle collides with a person or an object, or collides with rail equipment, such as an unattached flat car, that event still is reported as a rail collision, but a threshold such as an injury or property damage, it would have to be met in order for it to be reportable. Okay, so non-transit collisions must also meet a threshold. For example, if a piece of rail maintenance equipment, not a vehicle, but an equipment such as an unattached flat car, rolls away and collides with a person or an object, as I've just mentioned, it's reported as a non-transit collision. And we're going to also touch more on this in a little bit when we get to the form changes to help facilitate in reporting these. Another item I'd like to point out is not a clarification, but rather a revision to the wording in the Safety and Security Policy Manual pertaining to the runaway train threshold. The manual now more clearly states that this threshold applies only to revenue trains, not runaway work trains or other rail maintenance vehicles. So this personally identifiable information, this is a new change that we've put into place within about the last month or so, and this does apply to all modes. So in your event descriptions, please do not include any personal identifiable information such as names, addresses, phone numbers, of course, badge numbers, driver's license numbers, etc. We will ask you to remove them from the event descriptions. However, do continue to include ages and genders and counts of people. And while we're talking about these event descriptions, it's good to mention here that we want you to always include in your event description how many and what type of people were injured. It doesn't have to be a long statement, just something to the effect of 3 bus passengers were transported, and that tells us what we need to know, and it helps us validate your reports. So now we're going to talk about some form changes that we've had. So currently, when you report a collision or a derailment, the train vehicle involved form, and this actually does not just refer to rail, but it also refers to rail and non-rail modes. So again, as I was saying, the current form for the transit vehicle involved or the transit train involved form requires you to choose the vehicle type, the manufacturer, and the fuel type, with some exceptions based on mode. And what comes up when you go to choose this, as you know, is a list of all of the available options of all manufacturers, all vehicle types, and all different kinds of fuels. Beginning in 2020, so you're not going to see this until we get into January, the form will integrate with your agency's most current A30 Revenue Vehicle Inventory form. This will provide more accurate data and reduce the number of reports returned for an incorrect selection in any of these categories. It also, which is nice, makes the form a lot shorter. With this integration, you'll select a manufacturer from your fleet file based on the mode you're reporting. When a selection is made, the vehicle and the fuel types are part of the manufacturer record, so there's no need to make separate selections here. When you're operating, if you're operating a new manufacturer that's not in your A30, you will have an option to enter that on the form. However, it does not actually back update the A30 form itself. So this is a screenshot of how this fleet involved section appears on the transit train involved or transit vehicle involved form. You'll see that there's an existing fleet button and a new fleet button. Okay, so this is the screenshot that you would see after you clicked on the existing fleet button. The grid displays the available options from your A30 for the mode, again, that you're reporting, with columns representing the Revenue Vehicle Inventory ID, the agency fleet ID, the total number of vehicles, the vehicle type, the model, the year manufactured, and the fuel type. Some agencies have many selections, so you can use one of the 4 filter boxes that you see here to reduce the number of vehicles that come up in the grid, that table below. Excuse me. To select a vehicle from the fleet, you would click on the checkbox located to the left of the listing, and then you would click on the Add Fleet button, which you see right now is grayed out, but that's because nothing has been selected there. So once you select the checkbox, the Add Fleet will come alive, and you click on that to set that into your form. If the vehicle is not listed within the existing fleet, the user can add a new vehicle by clicking on the New Fleet button. And when you click on the New Fleet button, the grid will display drop-down boxes for you to select, just as you've done in the past, though it looks a little bit different, to select the vehicle type, the vehicle manufacturer, and the fuel type from a list of unrestricted options. So this goes back to that list of everybody, or every type of vehicle. Again, after you make this selection and you click on Add Fleet, that adds the fleet to the form, but it does not add that new vehicle to your A30 form. Okay, so once you've selected a vehicle or entered a vehicle, after we've selected a vehicle from the grid, this is how it would appear in your form. If you need to make a correction, then you would click on the red X to remove it, and then you'd start all over again with choosing a new fleet or one from your existing fleet if you chose an incorrect option the first time. All right. So earlier we reviewed the rail-to-rail collision reporting. We made one form change on setup screen 2 for rail modes to help in that clarification by changing the wording of one of the key questions, which is, we changed this question from were transit revenue vehicles involved in this event to were transit revenue vehicles or non-revenue rail transit vehicles involved in this event. And again, that's just to help facilitate where you report those vehicle maintenance, those maintenance vehicle collisions, excuse me. Also on the rail mode setup screen 2, we changed the word of the evacuation threshold question from did this event involve an evacuation for life safety reasons, evacuation of a train to the rail right-of-way, or customer self-evacuation to basically it's the same sentence except we took off the self-evacuation part. So while self-evacuation is a selection on the evacuation subform, it was only a threshold for calendar year 2017. So it was a bit confusing having that still reside there in 18 and 19. So of course that means that self-evacuations have to be related to an evacuation for life safety or an evacuation to the rail right-of-way. So for instance, if someone takes it upon themselves to exit a vehicle and thereby putting themselves onto the right-of-way, then it's a right-of-way evacuation that was a self-evacuation. Okay. For all modes, you may have noticed that we changed the lighting selection from artificial lighting to indoors. This is because we found that reporters would often choose artificial lighting if there were street lights outside at night, or if open rail platforms have lights, for the patrons, and they would choose artificial lighting there. So this makes it a little bit easier and more clearly aligns with the intent, which was always to collect lighting for events inside buildings or inside tunnels. Also for rail modes, a weather selection of tunnel was added to reduce the confusion in reporting, since you really don't have weather in a tunnel. You may also have noticed that if you chose tunnel, then the rail alignment automatically defaults to the selection for exclusive right-of-way tunnel. Again, this is to help reduce errors. I'm also sure you have noticed that the old has data column has been replaced with a report status column on both the summary view and on the dashboard. This launched around the end of June. Excuse me. So there are 4 status levels you will see. The first is open. For SNS 30 and 50 forms, you will see open for blank forms that are waiting for you to be completed. As you know, these forms launch themselves. SNS 30s launch at the beginning of the year. SNS 50s launch every month as soon as the new month is available. So these forms are waiting to be completed, or they are forms that are not submitted. They've only been saved. For SNS 40 forms, open represents, again, that the form has only been saved, since, of course, SNS 40s don't self-launch. SNS 50 forms will only show as approved, which we're going to talk about in a moment, but they're only going to show as approved if the form was returned to you and you revised it and then we approved it. And basically the reason for that is because we validate SNS 50s a different way. We don't open each SNS 50 in each report automatically like we do with SNS 40s. It's just a different method of it just because of sheer volume. So we can still see if there's an issue with the report. And again, if there is one, we'll return it. You'll correct it. Then you'll get an approved. All right. Of course, if you have any questions about this, we'd certainly be happy to clarify that. All right, so then submitted means that you are submitting the form to NTD for review. Returned, of course, means that your safety analyst has a question about the form or is requesting a change request. So this form requires attention from you. Good practice to take a look and see what forms may have been returned or may be overlooked. Approved means that we have approved and accepted the form. Again, note that SNS 40s submitted prior to the end of June, when this column changed, are only going to show submitted instead of approved, unless, of course, that form was returned after that time and we since approved it. Just as with the other columns, you can sort by the reporting status column to see if you have any open or any returned reports. For certification, which is coming up, you do not want to have any open or returned forms. So again, as we talk about, we're getting ready to do certifications, of course, in February, as many of you know. That 2019 CEO certification form will launch in the 2019 safety package in January. So when you're preparing your data and finalizing your data for certification, one of the things you may want to do before that certification is due, which is the end of February, is to go through and make sure you do not have any open SNS 40s or any unsubmitted SNS 40s. Unsubmitted and open SNS 40s will not be included in the count in your CEO certification forms. Okay. Also, you noticed that launched during 2019 was the comment box. These are located at the bottom of each form except for the SNS 20 CEO certification forms. And this allows the safety analyst to ask for clarifications or changes in a report. Each time the form is returned, it's time-stamped. You may have noticed that. Users may also respond to a request by putting in a comment in the comment box. However, please don't feel compelled to write a comment. For example, you don't need to necessarily say, I made the change. If you made the change and you resubmitted the form to us, we're going to know you made the change, and we're going to go in and take a look at the form and see if everything's good now so that we can approve it. Also of note, because I've seen this happen a few times myself, if we've asked you to add a comment to the event description, such as explaining no property damage or clarifying who was transported or that no one was transported, as it were. Again, you don't want to put that statement in the comment box because the comment box is not part of the permanent record. You want that to be in the event description where that will be part of the record. Okay, so that was short and sweet, but we did a lot. The hour time frame, in case we had any questions, not just about the things that we presented today, but if you have, I know we haven't had a training session since April, so if there's anything that you have a question about, please feel free to ask. And I'm going to bring up my chat box in case I see something come in, so I can answer it directly if I can find the chat box.
And do you want to read aloud the answered questions, or how do you want to?
Well, again, I'm trying to find my chat. Excuse me. It's not on my more. Let me try more. Are there any open questions in the chat box while I try to find?
Well, there's 3 questions in the Q&A box, and
Okay.
I think James answered the one from Karen that was in the chat. And then there's an answered one in the Q&A.
All right, well, I'm trying to, I apologize. I don't see the Q&A selection. Isn't it up with under more?
It might be under more.
Oh, I see it. I see it. I see it.
Got it? Okay.
All right.
Actually, there's 4 open questions and 1 answered one.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the open. So going forward, the first question from Jessica Rio, going forward, does your approval of an SNS 40 take into account the information added by the SSOAs in their new module? Well, that's an excellent question. What I'm going to say to that, because we haven't done any interaction with that yet, and I'm not quite sure what our process is going to be there, I'm going to say that if the SSO asks you to make a change and you make that change in the report, just be sure that you save and submit the report so that we can see what the change is made. And actually, as I think of that, maybe that's a good opportunity to say, to add a comment into the comment box that says, you know, changed to XYZ at SSO's request, something to that effect. Every time a report at SNS 40 is saved and submitted, we get an email, and we open those reports to see what's changed, whether it's something we requested or not. So that's the approach I'm going to go with at this point, Jessica, just because I don't know anything beyond that at this point. Okay, do we report self-evacuation? I thought we do not report self-evacuations. Okay, so again, with the self-evacuations, it's no longer a threshold, but there is a notation, there's a checkbox on the rail and non-rail evacuation subforms where you can indicate that it was a self-evacuation. So again, your self-evacuation would have to have been because it was a life safety event. For instance, the bus was on fire, so people started jumping out of the buses as soon as it filled with smoke, or so forth. So you're reporting an evacuation for life safety, but now you're also notating that it was a self-evacuation. Likewise, for rail specific, if it was, as I gave in the example earlier, someone decided to exit the bus because maybe it's stuck someplace and they're just impatient and they want to get out, and they jump out onto the rail alignment, now it's an evacuation to the right-of-way, which is also a reporting threshold, but on the evacuation form reporting the right-of-way evacuation, they would also click on self-evacuation to handle both of those. Okay. Let's see. I just discovered that a July incident should have been a major reportable. Should I report ASAP? Okay. Yes. If anytime that you've discovered something, and we see this as we come into the year, again, people are starting to prepare for CEO certifications. They start reviewing their data. And so if you see that you missed a report, maybe it was still under investigation or something, please put it in. You're not going to be penalized or anything else for getting that report in late, so that's fine. Also, if you reported it on the 50 non-major because they thought that's what it was, but then you discovered it was a major, be sure to take it out of that month's S&S 50s report when you do your major report. Okay. Would you want us to add a comment if the estimated damages are more than the originally entered? Again, not in the comment box, but in the event description. Okay, anything regarding the form selections, we want to, like property damage, people that are injured, things like that, you want to put that as part of the permanent record, which means in the event description. Okay, all right, that one's done. So no changes for S&S 40 and 50 for non-rail transit reporting guidelines. Okay, there's no threshold changes, but you do have the form changes that we talked about. So for well, there aren't any form changes for the S&S 50. Let me just say that. So nothing's changed there. For the S&S 40, we just have the few for non-rail that we spoke of. So that would be the fleet involved form that you'll see on your on your non-rail collisions. The lighting selection that we spoke about. No, I take that back. Actually, we didn't put tunnel lighting on the non-rail yet. We wanted to kind of weigh in on that before we made that change. So I guess that's really about it for non-rail, is that fleet selection. Okay. All right. Emmanuel. Hi, Emmanuel. Also for the A30 form, will it be the A30 form that we completed during the annual report? Yes, in your most recent annual report. That's where it'll be pulling from. Okay. I understand that we're adding the fleet to grab the details and to match the A30 inventory. However, is there a place to specify which vehicle in the fleet was involved in the collision? Yes, that's what you're selecting there. So when you choose your mode and that you click on add fleet, existing fleet button, it's going to come up with the list of options available for that mode. So all of the different, so if you're doing a bus mode report, it's going to come up with all of the bus vehicle manufacturers and the types and so forth from your A30. To select one, you click on the checkbox to the left of the item you want to select and then click on Add Fleet, and that'll put it into the report. What if someone exited a substation because they smelled smoke but did not see smoke? Okay, so we call that fumes on the other safety event form. A substation, oh, I hate to hang up on that, but if you mean they just left the railroad station because they smelled smoke but they didn't see smoke, I'm not sure how you would know that one person left for that reason. But let's put it this way, if everybody in the station, because evacuations are everybody, it really usually pertains to everybody that's in that environment when we're talking about a life safety situation. So the station fills with smoke, the bus fills with smoke, whatever it may be. Maybe they don't see the smoke like you said, maybe they just smell it, but if they all get out of that area, that bus, that station, because this smell is so overwhelming, they feel that, they're going to be harmed by it or something, I guess that's why they would leave, and they all leave, then yes, you would report that as fuel fumes or fumes, noxious odors, as we call it on the form, and include your evacuation. And I guess if it fits the subform self-evacuation, you would choose that as well. But primarily, that's an evacuation for life safety reasons. Okay. What if it's a new vehicle that's not on the A30? Okay, again, let me actually, you can still see my screen, I'm assuming. So let me go back to that screen just so you'll see it. Okay, so if it's not on your A30, then instead of choosing the existing fleet button, you choose the new fleet button. And when you click on that new fleet button, I think that was the next screen, nope, right here, then you can choose, just like you would have done before, you would choose the vehicle type. Was it a cutaway? Was it an articulated bus? Was it a van pool vehicle? Whatever it was. And then you will choose from a list of manufacturers, and you choose a fuel type. So this would just kind of revert it back to the way we used to try and validate the fort, which just means that we would open up your A30, make sure it's not there, and obviously you're adding this as a new one. But again, it's not going to backfill, it's not going to update that A30. So if this is a new vehicle that you're operating, you may want to talk to the person that submits your A30 form and see if they can't add that. Though there are restrictions to when things can be added to the annual forms based on what status there is, if they're in working mode, if they've already been accepted. So you'd have to talk to the annual validation analyst for your agency for that kind of change to the A30. Why is a non-transit related medical condition, mental health issue, have to be reported through NTD? This seems beyond the scope of NTD. We do not report transportations for chest pain or any other non-transit related medical conditions. Why mental health conditions? In this case, we capture that two ways, actually. We capture it for the people that have said that they intend to harm themselves. Because, again, we've classified that not as a suicide attempt, but they've indicated that they want to harm themselves, and that would be a mental health issue. It's not a, I hate to say it's not a medical issue, it's not a physical medical condition. So this exception has been made within NTD reporting. Likewise for train operators more specifically, but sometimes bus operators as well, if there's a collision, so they've just, run over a person and they're emotionally traumatized, then that person's transported. We also capture them. We just don't capture illnesses. So I know it's a fine line to say that these aren't mental illnesses, but that's the best guidance I have at this point. So I hope that helps answer the question. Will there be a transcript of the Q&A questions that were verbally given? Lori?
Yes, that should be available after I get it from the captioner.
Okay. If we get a new vehicle, will we have to update it once it is in revenue? I'm assuming you mean revenue service, or once a year during the SNS 30 submission. Okay, the vehicles do not pertain to the SNS 30. I don't know if that was just a typo. I think you mean SNS 40. That's okay, but just clarifying. Again, if this is a new vehicle, there are restrictions to when the A30 itself can be updated. So again, and I wouldn't know the status of that A30 without looking at the annual report for a particular agency. But the best thing to do at that point would be to reach out to the person that does your A30s, your annual reporting, and have them check with the annual analyst, so my counterpart on the annual side of reporting, to see if that can be added to the A30 or not. Okay. Do we report when a passenger reports that he was hit by the bus and was transported by ambulance, but after reviewing the video and the police report, we find that the passenger was lying? Do we report the incident? Okay, so we do sometimes come across these, and typically I know that because we obviously get the reports. So if the person's transported from the scene, so let's say they were standing at the bus stop, the bus hit them, or they think the bus hit them, and they called whomever, and they were transported, we typically take that. Now, honestly, if you have video proof that the person was not struck, you can certainly delete it. But then that brings up an excellent point. Please, I ask everyone, if you delete a report where we did not ask you to delete the report, please always tell your analyst, your safety analyst, because we just see that a number has disappeared overall from all the reporting, and then we identify an agency, and then we have to identify which report that agency got rid of and why they got rid of it. So please, we humbly ask you to always let us know when you delete something unrequested, and just let us know why, so that we can track that. Okay. If suicide or potential suicides are reported, why not drug ODs? Well, we get drug ODs if they think that it was intentional. Did they inject drugs in an attempt to commit suicide? Then we take it as a suicide. Otherwise, we don't, because drug abuse is considered a medical condition. I know we're riding that gray line there, but again, this is the guidance that I'm going on after doing this for a number of years, and probably someone at FTA headquarters has a better answer than I do. But if you would like to discuss it more, or would like some other more official validation on that, please let me know. Just email me, and I'll be happy to see if I can't find out what the answer to your question. And I'm just going to bring our contact information back up here so you can see it. And these are, just to deviate for a moment, as you can see, I put up James and my contact information here, but I also put up here Angie Wang. She's the NTD program manager at FTA headquarters, and then Joe Eldridge is the NTD project manager. So you can also reach out to these people as well. All right, let's see. Hydrogen electric vehicles, have they updated the forms to include hydrogen as a fuel type? Quite honestly, I do not know. I would have to look at the vehicle fleet files that we have to see if hydrogen has been included. But if not, I will make a note of this so that I can ask. This is Sunline. Let me just make a quick note to ask if they have a timeline, if hydrogen is going to be added, and perhaps when. Hydrogen electric to fuel type. Well, let's see. So I guess that means if you're adding in this new vehicle in your A30, it doesn't have hydrogen as a fuel type. Okay, I will find out about that, Sunline. All right. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for you, but I'm just not sure about that. We really don't deal with the A30s except for the integration with the form itself. Okay, I understand the process for adding a fleet, but that wasn't my question. Oh, okay. The fleet selected could have 10 vehicles in it, but only one of those 10 was involved. Let's say the agency, ID, whatever. Is there a place to identify the agency's ID? Bonnie, I confess I'm a bit confused. Obviously, if you have a collision, not 10 vehicle types are involved in it, only one of those, so you choose that vehicle, but obviously I guess I'm missing the question here. So here's my phone number. You see it over there on the screen. Please feel free to give me a call after the meeting so I can be more specific in answering you. You're only going to see, maybe this is it, you're only going to see the vehicles in that fleet for your specific NTD ID number, if that's what you're asking. And then they're going to be specific to mode. So if you were reporting a demand response vehicle, you would see different selection based on what's in your agency's agency ID numbers A30. Okay, well, at any rate, if you still have a question, again, please feel free to call me after this is over, and I'll be happy to help you. Just to be clear, if a customer informs our CSA that they wish to harm themselves and it's transported on the SNS 40, no, it's reported on the SNS 50. So there's no details. You just go into the report, you indicate the location, the SNS 50 report, you indicate the location, which I would imagine be your transit center, your platform or whatever, and then you'd say I had one person and one person transported, and that's it. It's not a detailed form. If they clearly intend, there's a clear intent for them to harm themselves, they jumped in front of the bus or the train and thankfully did not, and they did it on purpose, maybe they indicate that they intended to do it, then it becomes a major event and you report that on the SNS 40 form as an attempted suicide. If the bus actually hit them or the train actually hit them, then you actually report it as a collision, and there's a place to indicate, two places actually, to indicate that it was an attempted suicide. How do we delete a fleet vehicle if we have retired the series? Again, that's an A30 question. We are just integrating with that A30 form, so it's basically like bringing in a little sub-window of that A30 form. That's done through the annual analyst, so if you've retired something, the A30 would be updated, and again, depending upon the status of your A30, your annual report at that time, you may or may not be able to remove it at that time. Again, that would be your annual analyst's question, and if you don't know who your annual analyst is, you can certainly contact either James or I, and we'll be happy to find out who that is. It's in the system, actually. If you're in the system and you click on the NTD, instead of clicking on NTD safety package, you click on NTD reporting package, for your agency, then you'll see the annual analyst's name there. To Bonnie's question, a group of 10 vehicles could be filed under one NTD ID, and they all have identical year of build, etc. How is a specific individual vehicle involved in the accident identified? Well, I would assume that would be identified in your accident report, not by the police report, but on whatever internal process you have for identifying that particular vehicle. Maybe, I know all vehicle bus numbers, and they have a bus number on them, so maybe that's located why it might not be in the A30. I don't actually know if it is or not. Maybe that's what that RVI ID is. I'm not 100% sure on, let me go back there, RVI. This RVID might be a unique ID number. You can see this is just a test sample here, so I really don't even have an actual example because this doesn't launch until January. So perhaps, and I have seen in there where it will have, 35, oh, well, it's got a model number here. Well, it might have that there's 35 of, this articulated bus and 23 of those articulated buses, and even though they're all, North American buses or whatever they are, I'm not 100% sure, honestly. I may need to ask that of an annual analyst myself to see how that is identified on the fleet file. But I mean, yeah, that again, that's unfortunately the best answer I have at this point. So I apologize for any confusion there, but I will certainly get more up to speed as we progress in this, and check with the annual analysts on your question there about how one would be identified, uniquely identified. So sorry for the confusion there. Okay, how do we delete? Oh, I think I already answered that one about deleting one. Okay, with vehicle information now listed, how should a smaller agency handle if reporting a collision when they lend an MBDO vehicle for a DRDO service that day, or vice versa? Well, I guess in that situation, the only workaround I could see to that would be to use the new fleet button and indicate it there, and type in the manufacturer, fuel type, and vehicle type. I don't see any other way of getting around that, because the forms only, if you're doing an MBDO report, it's only going to show the things that are in the MBDO revenue file, the A30 for that mode. A30s are done for each mode that the agency operates, each mode and type of service. So if you're borrowing from one type of service to another, there's no way that it's going to come up in the form. So you'd have to use the new fleet button in that case. All right. What about taxi paratransit? Do we have to add those fleet into the A30? Yes. Any operations that you run, if you report demand response taxi, then you have a demand response taxi A30. So those would be in that file. Yes. Each mode and type of service. That's how it's broken down. So MBPT, MBDO, DRPT, DRDO, DTP, etc. Each mode would have a different A30. The RVID contains many vehicles, but if one vehicle in the fleet is in an accident, how do we identify those in the A30? Again, this is the same as Bonnie, and I apologize. I don't think I know the answer to this. I'm going to have to find out what identifier in this A30 list here uniquely identifies a particular vehicle. Yeah, I honestly don't know. I thought it would have all covered in the options that are there, because it does have, the model numbers and the year that one was manufactured and so forth. But if that's not the case, then I need to delve into that and find out the answer to the question. So any of you that do have a question about that, or maybe everybody does, I'm just trying to figure out how I would disseminate that to everyone. Maybe we can put out a notice or an email or something to that effect to let everybody know once we get the answer to that. So I apologize again that I don't know the answer to that question right now. All right. Are there plans to change the historical report lookup to include the event type? Historical report lookup. No. Well, no. There are no plans right now to do that. That's a thought. It includes it inside, but I get what you're meaning. When you do look up the historical report and look at SNS 40s or whatever, all you see is, numbers. It doesn't tell you what kind of, you see the date and the mode and that kind of thing, but you don't see what kind of event it is. So I could see where that may be helpful to have the event type there. So that's something I will add to the list. And add and see what the consensus is on that. Look up. We have to discuss this, of course. Look up the event type. Okay, that's a good suggestion. Take a look at that. Thank you. But again, right now there's nothing in place to do that at this point. All right. If we lend a vehicle to a mutual aid request to an allied agency and the vehicle is involved in a reportable collision, which agency has this? Okay. Regardless of I should say regardless of where the vehicle came from, incidents are reported by the agency that had the accident. Whether or not they're using their own vehicles, I was not aware that people lend buses or vehicles to other agencies, so that's interesting to know. I've never had that question before. But again, I would have to stand by that the agency that had that accident would report that accident. I could see where on the back end that may cause some confusion with if there's a total loss and things like that, but I think that would be more of an internal process rather than who had the collision. So under the agency that was using that vehicle at the time. All right. Are the reporting criteria matching the 49 CFR 74 reporting criteria now? Yes, they have been ever since 2017, with a little bit of an exception. So 49 CFR, which refers to rail modes only, just in case anyone's wondering, were really written for the State Safety Oversight Program, and knowing that the State Safety Oversight Program was going to be changing to 674, NTD changed their reporting criteria in 2017 basically to match that. Now, since that time has gone by, since that was done, the state side of the data, their thresholds are a little bit different. Well, without going into all of that right now, which I could certainly talk about in a separate conversation, but they are a little bit different. Well, let me give you one example. So for on our side, on the NTD side, we automatically collect grade crossing collisions, regardless of anything else. On the state safety oversight reporting, that's not the case. It would have to have a serious injury, or it would have to involve a runaway train, or it would have to have an evacuation, or it would have to have substantial damage or a fatality or a serious injury. I think I said serious injury. At any rate, so there are some differences. Now, with regard to how the state's interaction moving forward, I guess pretty much now, I think that's live now. They have a new state reporting system, and rather than actually reporting data in, what they're going to be doing is pulling NTD data out that meets their 674 guidelines. So for example, one of the things that it would not pull in from the data you report would be an assault, for example, with one injured person that's a non-serious injury. They would not look at that report. That does not meet their reporting criteria. Okay, so hopefully that answers your question. Again, if you'd like more details, we can certainly go into that. And I see, Lynn, you have another question. So let me see. Will there be a historical report lookup to sort reports to see if any bikes or pedestrian accidents in a given time frame? No. No, the historical report basically just shows, it lists line items. You have if you limit your historical report to S&S 40s, and that's what you're looking at. You know, it gives you a unique identifier. It gives you the NTD report ID, and it gives you the date, and it gives you the mode. I think it might, can't remember if it shows that there were any injuries or not on the front screen of that, the summary screen of that, or not off the top of my head. But let me just put it this way, there's no changes in the works to the historical report form at all. Now, obviously, since we have some interest there, I'm glad to know people are looking at it, first of all, but we'll be happy to discuss any changes to that form that could make it more user-friendly for you and what people are using it for. So hopefully that will answer your question. So if you do have suggestions for changes to the historical lookup report, which is, by the way, for everybody else, available on the Reports tab. I know most of you are used to going into the Records tab, but if you go to Reports, there are reports there that you can use. Please send them to me, and I will collect those and present them for suggested changes. All right. So if the agency using the Lent bus has an accident and is therefore responsible for reporting, would they now have to add it to their, no, they wouldn't add it to their A30 since they're just borrowing that vehicle. It's not part of their fleet, I guess, unless they regularly borrow it. In that case, they'd have to talk to the annual analyst. I'm not sure how they deal with that. But outside of that, I think they would use the new fleet button to indicate that they use that. But let me see the rest of your question. Would they now add that to their A30 and track all that is involved in A30 reporting? As I said, again, I don't think so. So then it becomes part of their revenue vehicles, even though they didn't purchase it or maintain it. Well, that's what I mean. I think that's the rub there. And I don't know how the annual analysts handle that kind of scenario. Like I said, I was not even aware that people lent vehicles to other agencies. So that's a new one to me. To me, I don't think it would be part of their A30 because it's not one of their vehicles. But again, that would be an annual analyst question. For our part of it on the safety and security reporting, they were using this borrowed vehicle. I think that they would use the new fleet button to add that for this individual accident that they had. Okay. What if the bus and the operators were lent? Oh, to help local RR service due to track work. Railroad service, okay, due to track work and was involved in an accident, who reports? Again, I have to go with the fact that of who, okay, I don't know, I've never been asked this question. All right, I think I would think that, well, so now it's your operator and your vehicle that somebody else is using. It's an interesting question. I'm debating, quite honestly. I still think it was their service. I'm trying to see what's outweighing what here, that it was another, it's one agency's providing the service, but they're using another agency's operator and vehicle. I'm still thinking that it would be for the agency that had the event, but I'm not 100% sure. Ray, I'm going to jot down your name here, and anybody else can, again, send me an email pertaining to this question. And Ray Mezzo. Okay. I'm going to have to find out how we should treat this. Again, I've never been made aware that this was going on, so I would need to clarify with my superiors how we're going to collect that. So Ray, I will get back to you individually. Bonnie, I'm going to include you in on that. And I believe there was another one. So again, just please shoot me a quick reminder email. I'll go back to the contact here, data, so that I can remember I catch everybody in that email that does that kind of practice. All right, so I will have to find out. Will the reports include scooters and alternate mobility collisions? Well, as far as the report is concerned, if you have a collision with a scooter or a lift vehicle, those glide, what do they call it? Yeah, those new kind of scooters. I'm thinking scooters, I think of the motorcycle kind of scooters, but I think perhaps you may be talking about those renta things that are around towns and the cities and so forth now. So yes, I mean, you still, if it's a reportable collision, it's a reportable collision. If it's a scooter, you can check the motorcycle/scooter option. If it's something else, then there's an option for you to use other and type in what it is. But again, if it's a scooter, please go ahead and use that scooter option, even though it may not be a motorcycle type of scooter. If it's, I don't know, maybe those, can't remember what those things are called with the big wheels that go around. At any rate, traditionally those kind of things, like sometimes I've had some recent reports where they hit, you know, they said they hit the skateboard that a person was on, or a glider kind of thing that the person was on. And we're going to treat that the same way as we treat a bicycle. So you wouldn't include a motor vehicle in that selection, in that report, and your collision with would be a person. So hopefully that answers your question. And it seems that the agency that lent the vehicle and the operator reports it. They have all the information on the A30 and in the description to mention that the vehicle was lent to another agency. Oh, they do? Okay, again, I'm not, I confess, I'm not 100% on what's included in that A30. I made the assumption, obviously to my detriment here, that that was their actual owned fleet, but I could be completely wrong in that, and am going to have a lengthy discussion with an annual analyst to more fully explain the A30 to me. The integration with that form is new to us. We've just in the past always looked at it in a spreadsheet form, so we just see manufacturers and so forth, and just to verify if that selection was accurate, because as you know, for some of you, we've sent it back and said you don't have this in your fleet file. But if the borrowed vehicles are also included in that A30, that may be the answer right there. I'm just going to have to double check, and Emmanuel, I'm going to add you to the list here and make sure I respond via email. Okay. Has anything popped up in the chat box? Okay, it looks like those questions were... Oh, you're right. Somebody pointed out about Joe's email, and you're absolutely right there. I left out the R in his last name in the email address. Oops, it went away. Okay, so just go by his last name, please. I spell it wrong. I apologize.
Good catch.
Yeah, it is a good catch. I didn't see it as many times as I looked at that page.
That's why you didn't see it, because you kept looking at it. You don't see anything anymore. I guess no more questions? Last call? Oh, Bernadette Townsend has one.
Okay, Bernadette. Hi, Bernie. Will we be able to get a copy of this presentation to share with our team? I can certainly email one with you, and I think Lori also has a link that she can show to you.
Yeah, that's for the handouts. I don't know if you want to share the actual PowerPoint with anybody.
Oh, okay. Well, I can, anybody that wants this PowerPoint, you can certainly email me. I'll be happy to send it to you. And also in a week or so, this presentation and all of what you've heard me say will be on NTI's webpage up under YouTube.
Hopefully in a week. I mean, I'm in a bit of a holiday crunch, and Rutgers is closed the week between Christmas and New Year, so it's optimistic to think that it'll be up by the end of next week, but you might want to give me till early next year, just saying. I will try my best, but it might be early in January. Okay. Any more questions?
Well, again, please feel free to contact any of us afterwards, and those of you with the question about the borrowed vehicles, again, please just send me an email so I can collect those and talk to everybody. When will the manual be submitted? The manual has been, the new policy manual for 2020 has been sent up to FTA for approval, so it should be posted before the end of the year. Yes.
Okay. I guess that's it.
Okay. Yep.
I'll wrap it up. That was great. Everything went great. So thank you, Anne. I want to thank everyone who participated in this webinar. James, thank you for manning the chat box and the Q&A box in the beginning there. And as a reminder to everyone, you will be receiving an invitation to fill out an evaluation for this webinar. NTI really appreciates that, so take a few minutes and complete that when you get it. And you can check the YouTube page next week, but again, it might be sometime in early January. So thank you, and enjoy your holidays, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.